Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump wrapped up a whirlwind Middle East tour on Friday, the final stop being the United Arab Emirates, inking another big business deal. But aside from business, many are noting a shift in strategy in the region, like meeting with Syria's new leader, a former al-Qaeda member. Here to delve into what the trip means and what to expect next are two guests: Jim Gilmore, former governor of Virginia and former U.S. ambassador to the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe, and John Byrnes, Strategic Director of Concerned Veterans for America, as well as a U.S. Marine Corps and Army National Guard veteran. Thank you both so much for being here. Ambassador Gilmore, with all the developments coming out of this Middle East trip so far, in your view, what's been the most significant?
Well, good Sunday evening. I think that there's a lot to be said about this trip. First of all, it's the United States engaging in geopolitics. We're talking to Middle East people there that can be our allies and can be our friends relative to Iran. That sends a message to Iran that they're not going to be, the United States is not going to be alone in confronting them regarding their nuclear program. I think it sends a message that Israel is not dictating American policy because he didn't go to Israel at this point, and I think that that separates us a little bit from the Gaza war. But most importantly, to your point, is Syria. Syria was basically a satellite of Russia. It gave them a port into the Mediterranean. Russian troops were there, but the Russians are being kicked away from this now, and that is strategically important for the European war and the Ukrainian war.
And John, in your view, what was the most significant of this trip?
Well, I think the most significant part for me is there's a little bit of shift in tone, and frankly, it makes me anxious from my point of view. Where President Trump is talking about expanding security, guarantees. He didn't quite use the word guarantees, but expanding those kind of security promises, those security constructs to nations like Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. I'm particularly concerned with extending a full kind of alliance blanket, Article 5 of NATO protection for Saudi Arabia, given their reckless driver approach to foreign policy. I'm not only a veteran of the Marine Corps and the Army National Guard, but as an Army National Guard soldier, I was at September 11th, or I was at Ground Zero in New York on September 11th. And I still talk to families who are just outraged at the fact that we would be cutting deals with the current Qatari government or the current Saudi government.
In terms of foreign policy, Ambassador, talk to us about Trump's strategy here. Is it a major shift in U.S. diplomacy in the region? Besides Syria, for example, he accused Qatar of funding terrorism, and now he struck a major deal with them.
Well, I think that it is a shift in tone and a shift in strategy. And by the way, I would agree that that the idea of extending NATO protections to some of these countries is at least premature and maybe just not acceptable. So I agree with the other commentator. But nonetheless, we are in a very difficult situation in two different ways. One is Iran. We have now declared that they can't get a nuclear weapon. They are determined to get a nuclear weapon. And I think that if we end up, if they continue to proceed, we're going to end up with a very, very difficult military situation that we're going to have to address. And then my message has been consistent for months and months, if not years, that the pivot of the future depends upon the Ukrainian war. They have a game plan. They know what they're trying to do. They are determined to re-extend their influence and reassemble the Russian Empire. The Mediterranean bases in Syria were a major advantage on that, and that is now gone. So even though it's very undesirable to even talk to some of these people, as the other commentator has said, this is geopolitically very, very interesting development of tone and strategy by President Trump.
I want to get to Iran in a bit, but first, John, speaking of the deal in Qatar, while there, Trump stopped by the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, promising pay raises for all the troops stationed there. He also gave a shout out to the one from Butler, Pennsylvania, given that's where he survived an assassination attempt. Now, as a veteran yourself, how do you think troops are viewing Trump's visit there?
Well, the troops have kind of a very positive view of President Trump right now. I think that they're happy with some of the things that he's been saying about the military. I've spent some time at Camp Doha. It's a very comfortable place regarding the other outposts that we've had in the Middle East over the last 20, 25 years. But at the same time, it's not a comfortable place overall. I mean, when I was there, we were searched like deeply for weapons, even though we were coming in as at the time allies staying at a base, a secure base in their country. Again, I'm very, very hesitant to deals with the Qataris at any level. I know we talk about strategic need for air power there. I just think there are better ways to do it. I like our over the horizon capacities. I think where the ambassador and I really kind of agree is that we need to take a realist approach to the region and a realist approach to U.S. foreign policy overall. I think we disagree quite a bit on the specifics, though.
And Ambassador, speaking of geopolitics, zooming out a bit here, Trump said one reason for the trip was to reverse the trend of China filling in the vacuum in the region. Here's a clip of that from Fox News.
They were being coaxed very strongly by China because that solves China's fuel problem forever. And it wasn't their preference, but they were on their way. They were going to China, and that was going to be their parent. And that's not happening anymore.
Ambassador, how do you see this trip sealing off China from the region? Are these deals enough to accomplish that?
Well, I think it's a good start. The idea that China would extend their influence into the Middle East, which would empower China, then gives them more of a willingness, perhaps, to strike at Taiwan, which would be a catastrophe for everybody because it would probably ignite a major war in the Pacific. I want to get something in before I run out of time. The president is saying that it's important to get Putin to the negotiating table, and apparently he has a scheduled call with Putin tomorrow. I want to make it clear. My advice to the president would be to remember the goal and objective of the Russians here, the Chinese matter, to that matter also, and to not just get them to the bargaining table, to be very careful as to what ultimately deal is struck, because we can't have a situation where Putin prevails and extends his influence, which then I believe would encourage the Chinese to attack Taiwan.
And John, one country Trump didn't visit was Iran. He did say while in the UAE that the U.S. and Iran have sort of agreed to terms on a nuclear deal. Now, Trump has warned if Iran doesn't agree, quote, something bad is going to happen. What would that look like? Or can we expect Iran to agree to avoid that?
Well, I think President Trump has made it kind of a signature item of his to never quite give away what he's holding in his hand. So there are absolutely lots of economic sanction options, military options, from special operations to over the horizon strikes to the worst case scenario, boots on the ground in Iran, which would be horrible. I think, though, I want to kind of be optimistic and lean on President Trump's self-described deal-making ability and hope that this really leads to a long-term deal that keeps the U.S. footprint in the Middle East to a minimum and avoids a direct confrontation or war of any sort, whether it's boots on the ground or over the horizon with Iran.
And as we come down to the wire here, Ambassador, in your view, what can we expect to see in the region following Trump's visit?
I think that he's put more chess pieces on the board by making this trip and doing the contacts that he's doing. I don't think he did anything that would compromise America's national security, but he's added more things, just as he has added more things about the negotiations on the Ukrainian side, which added a whole new dynamic to that. But I want to come back to the key point. We always have to think about what the opposition wants to do, Iran, China, and Russia, what their goals and objectives are. We always have to ask whether their goals and objectives are in the American national interest. In the case of these countries, they are not. So we have to be very careful about what kind of deal we're striking, because we don't want to empower these people to act against the American national interest.
And John, final thoughts?
I would follow that up with, between Iran, Russia, China, and other threats, we also have to be very circumspect, given that in spite of being the world's superior military power today, the superiority isn't what it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. And so we really have to be careful about allocating those military resources and the economic resources that support them, and not taking on three major competitors at the same time head to head.
Ambassador Gilmer, John Byrnes, thank you both so much for joining us.